This is Exposure, the Adam Strauss Exposure, and this is week 13. This is my weekly project where I put out a very imperfect video every week as an exposure for my OCD perfectionism, as a way of confronting it. And I've found that doing these as a live is an even more effective exposure. Yes, and I'm doing this one. This one has some unique characteristics logistically, structurally. It is, I think, about 11:05 p.m. On the East Coast, which is where I am. I'm at my parents' place in the Boston area. Typically, I do these in the early afternoon, so my energy may be flagging. Though certainly, I've done thousands over the years, thousands of late night stand-up shows. I'm used to performing late. Yeah, and I think the other thing that sets this one apart potentially is I don't really want to be doing this. Not that I've always wanted to do them, but when I started this project 13 weeks ago, though actually it's been more than 13 weeks, I've skipped some weeks, and in fact, I skipped last week, and maybe I'll get to why. But maybe I'm getting to why right now. Part of the why is, when I started doing this, it felt liberating. And the whole idea behind this is I have found a lot of freedom on stage in live performance by going on stage in comedy clubs and in theaters with solo theater with really very little idea of what I'm going to say and just letting it unfold in the moment. It is the antidote for my perfectionism. But I have found this more difficult to do with social media, with putting out videos. I don't put out a lot of content, though I fucking hate that word content. I mean, content is what you find in a cadaver's stomach when you do an autopsy. But anyway, that is the reality of the artistic marketplace today. It is much more marketplace than artistic, and you have to put out stuff. And I want to put out stuff, let me be clear. I think this is not just a viable channel, I think it's an intriguing channel, putting out videos. And yet I generally have not done it because of the perfectionism. You know, I'll spend too much time on something and then I'll put it out and it won't get the response I want and then I'll be discouraged. So this whole project is just put out shit. And in fact, the original title of this was The Adam Strauss Show, the acronym ASS. And I like that as a way of lowering my own expectations. Anyway, when I started doing this, there was kind of all this force behind it for me, this emotional charge of really, and it felt liberating, and it also felt vital in the sense that there was a lot happening in my life right then, a few months ago, and a lot of flux, a lot of change, and now things feel more settled. And so I don't feel such a need to share because the way I've always made sense of the world, I think probably this is true of all humans, maybe not all humans, is by narratives, by stories, initially in my head, talking to myself, but also sharing my stories on stage. And so when I feel like there's a lot going on, I have a lot to process, that means I have a lot to share. But I think, anyway, here I am, here we are, if there is any we. Again, I've covered up my phone so I can't see who's on this. Let's get caught up. Like I said, there hasn't been a lot of change in the last couple of weeks. As I've said before, Freud identified the two main domains of life as love and work, relationship and career. And both of those are fortunately and respectively, unfortunately, stable. The relationship is fortunately stable. I've been with my partner Anna now for coming up on 20 months. Our 20-month anniversary is January 7th. And as I've shared before, I track our anniversaries very precisely. It always feels to me a little bit like someone who's like in a 12-step program where it's like, oh, I have 230 days of sobriety. And I think that is not coincidental. In some ways, this relationship is a form of sobriety from the way I was living for many, many years, being essentially single in relationships, but not really opening my heart. And I can say in a way that was an addiction to safety. An addiction to safety and control by not being in a deeply vulnerable relationship, though I didn't consciously see it as such until I had a mushroom trip 20 months ago, where this became very clear, and I met my partner a few days later. Anyway, the relationship feels solid, stable. We're apart right now. As I mentioned, I'm back in my parents' place in the Boston area. She is traveling. And do I miss her? Um, no, I wouldn't say I miss her yet. And I feel a little quiver as I say that because she watches these. I share them with her generally before. She could be watching this one right now. Um, yeah, I think a part of me enjoys little breaks. And I think, well, this is also part of why I probably don't miss her, at least not. No, I'm just going to own it. I don't miss her. I don't, if you're watching Anna, I was going to say I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. I don't miss you. I haven't thought about her that much. And I think that's because I'm in a place where I get a lot of social connection. This place, this house, is the place where I have gotten and given the most love in my life in recent decades, really. And the house, it's not just my parents, it's a two-family house that my parents reside in with my sister, my brother-in-law, and my two nephews and one niece who I'm extremely close. I'm extremely close with everyone, but the nephews and nieces it's a different form of magic. I never really loved kids. In fact, I never even really, I mean, I liked kids, I guess, but I always felt I wanted kids, but more in an intellectual sense because I love novelty, which is odd because I also am terrified of change and novelty is change, but I love novelty. I mean, that's what's, I think, in part been behind me experimenting and trying so many different novel psychedelics and liking traveling and things like, though all those things, as I say that, those things also scare me. So there is this attraction to things that scare me, which I think is a universal human thing. So, but yeah, I never felt like a visceral urge to have kids. I felt like, oh, it's something I want to do because I want to have that experience. The same way some people are like, oh, I want to climb K2. It felt like, sure, I'm alive for a short period of time. I want to experience this until my first nephew was born. And even then, it took about 6 months because babies, newborns don't do anything to me because they're not really human. You know, you can't really interact with them. But there was this moment where my nephew, he was quite precocious, he was 6 months old, and I was alone with him in a room. We were sitting across from each other. He was propped up on a couch, and he started giggling, and I started laughing, and he started laughing more, and I started laughing more, and it was undeniably a form of communication, and I think in a way, the deepest communication that two people can have, which is sharing this sense of wonder and befuddlement, because really the unspoken dialogue is he was laughing. He was like, kind of like, what is this? What is this existence? And I was like, I don't know. And he was like, you don't know? You're an adult. You're a grown up. I don't know. It was a beautiful exchange. And I really fell in love with him at that point. And we've been very close since. And he's about to turn fucking 15 years old. That is astounding to me. And I have, yeah, and he has a younger brother and a younger sister. And I have fallen in love with each of them in turn, and I love all of them. And I have a very special place in their lives, and they have a very special place in my life. And so there's a lot of love in this house. A lot of love in this house because this is my family, because most people my age, the phrase my family refers more to, their own family, their own partner, their own kids. For me, this has been my family because I haven't had a deep relationship in so many years before this one. So this is all to say that I get a lot of love from my partner Anna, and I get a lot of love when I'm here. And I think one thing I'm realizing is, yeah, love, human connection is essential. And of course, there's different types and different forms, but at some level, it's just kind of like food, right? Like, yeah, you can enjoy prime rib, which is what I had for dinner tonight, or you can enjoy butternut squash lasagna, which is what my mom is making tomorrow night. Very, very different dishes. But the biggest distinction is not the types of food you enjoy, but whether or not you're eating. And for many, many years, I deprived myself of, well, certainly romantic love. There was a fair amount of sexual love, but sexual love, I mean, it is love. That's the thing. I don't want to get on this digression. I've talked about this on stage, but that phrase, making love, it always was so odd to me. What are you making? But the older I got, the more I understood that when you're very present in the sexual act, I feel like love is an inevitable byproduct whether or not you want it there. At least for me, I start developing feelings for people, even if they're people who, it's not the context of like a deep relationship. Having said that, it's much better when it is in the context of a deep relationship. Though it can be pretty good even when it's not. And yeah, having this. Anyway, my point being, yeah, this was the only real source of love. There were friends, certainly, but in terms of like, yeah, so I shouldn't say the only real source of love, because I have friends who I genuinely love and who genuinely love me. But in terms of, this was the most reliable and deepest source of love in my life for many, many years. And now I have this other source, but it's nice to come back to this source. So yeah, things feel very solid with Anna, though there is a part of me that's always like, in past relationships, I had OCD about the relationships, having doubts about people, about the part, finding flaws essentially. Oh, they're not good enough. There's something wrong with them. And with Anna, as I've shared before, I don't have that at all, which is incredible, an incredible blessing. But I do sometimes have what my friend Kevin calls I don't know CD, where it's not like, oh, they're not good enough, they're not hot enough, they're not smart enough. It's more like, yeah, I just don't quite know about this, even though there's no substantive objections or concerns. And that's the most I get with Anna. The worst it ever gets is this sort of I don't know, which really I see is the same, it exists to serve the same function that the more overt finding flaws with potential partners served in the past. And what that function is serves to try to distance me so that I'm not so vulnerable. Because my life is so different than it was a year and a half ago before Anna. And, I'm not lonely. I think the definition for me, of being in love, that acute phase of being in love, which somehow we're still in after over a year and a half, is you're not lonely in that phase. You're just not lonely. Even when I'm not with her, I'm not lonely. And someone who's experienced tremendous loneliness for most of their life, including at times when I've been in relationships, I'm not lonely. I've lost that sadness. But in a sense, what I've done is I've transmuted it, I've traded it for fear, because there's more vulnerability. So there is always a part of me that's like, I don't know what's going to happen with this, but the longer it goes on, the more solid it feels. And the more I'm aware of just, how rare it is to have someone who, there is nothing I don't love about this woman. There really is nothing I don't love about her. Physically, emotionally, intellectually, her values, it's that horrible, cringeworthy cliche, but she really is my best friend. She is the person whose company I enjoy the most. So, So, and maybe that's part of why I don't miss her so much right now, is because it just kind of feels like, all right, that's there, that's solid. The other thing that hasn't changed, so that hasn't changed for the better. I don't want that to change. It will change, it'll grow, it'll evolve, it could end at some point. But yeah, it feels like there's a baseline stability there. We're both very committed to it, we're both very in love. It's a very sweet thing. But the other thing that's not changing in the love and work sort of schema is the work part, the career part. Not that I would have expected that to change dramatically in the last couple of weeks, but yeah, as I've shared before, I have been grappling with the thing I've avoided seeing, even though it's incredibly obvious, which is my career is not going well. Yeah. My career is more or less at the same level it was at, I would say, 2016. And I guess you could say it's actually going worse because, if you don't have, I had forward momentum then. So, and I think part of why it's not going well is precisely because I have refused to see it. For me, it's very, very similar to the relationship. For all these years when I was alone, in my mind, it was like, oh, the perfect relationship is just around the corner. And it's been the same thing with my career. It's like, oh, the perfect career is just around the corner. It's about to happen. And let me be clear. My skill I've improved. I'm far better than I was a year ago and far better than I was 2 years ago. I take huge risks on stage and I grow quickly. I'm very, very happy with where I'm at artistically. But again, I can't pay my rent by just being like, hey, look how good the stuff I'm doing is. I need actual career success, and that has been totally stagnant. And I think part of why it's been totally stagnant is because, again, going back to this analogy, you might be part of why it's stagnant is because this is very meandering. And anyway, part of why it's been stagnant is because I've refused to see it stagnant. The same way part of why I was alone for so long, part of why I was effectively single for so long is because I thought the perfect relationship would materialize. I thought the perfect career would materialize. And in the relationship thing, what it turned out was it wasn't materializing because I didn't actually want it to materialize. As much as I was just really beset with an aching loneliness, I realized on this mushroom trip, I was afraid of the vulnerability. And when I realized that, I was able to change it. And it changed remarkably quickly. I met my partner 4 days later. I have no doubt that if I'd met her before that mushroom trip, it would have gone nowhere. And I've realized the same thing with my career to some extent. I've realized to some extent, why hasn't it changed? Because part of me doesn't want it to change. Part of me doesn't, why do I have to cover up my screen right now? Because I don't want to see how many people are watching. It's probably a very small number. But if it's a big number, that's almost worse in a way. It's this weird thing. But I wonder if a lot of performers have this. Where yes, of course, part of me wants to share my art with the widest possible audience. Not the widest possible audience. I don't want to be famous, and I think we can all agree that's not a big risk. I don't want to be at the level of success where you start to lose your anonymity, where people you can't just go out in public without being recognized. But there's a big delta between where I am and that. So yes, I want to reach many, many more people with my art, but there's a part of me that is terrified of judgment, that cares desperately what people think about me. And the more people watching me, the more people judging me, the more people potentially not liking what I do, inevitably not liking what I do, because not everyone is going to like what I do. Not everyone likes what I do. A part of me doesn't want to be seen. Even though I've gone on stage 10,000 times, a part of me doesn't want to be seen. It's the exact same thing. A part of me is afraid of what I want. To quote that memorable LCD Sound System lyric. I'm afraid of what I want. And actually, the second part of that lyric is quite fitting right now. It's, you're afraid of what you want. If you weren't, I don't know what we'd talk about. I don't know what I'd talk about. So I've seen that. And I've made that conscious. And I've made the decision that, no, I do want to reach more people. But of course, there's a key difference between having a fulfilling romantic relationship and having a successful career in the arts, which is the latter is statistically much rarer. Though, many, many more people have relationships than have successful careers in the arts. Maybe not many more people have successful relationships, depending on how you define successful. So I'm not saying it's just like, oh, I've been holding myself back unconsciously, and now that I've made this conscious, my career is going to launch to the next level. But I think it's part of the equation. But yeah, this pain of not having the career I want, which I was totally oblivious of until really a few months ago. I think part of it is, the deeper pain, the primary pain of being alone, that pain is fixed, that pain is gone. So now, hey, I can attend to this other pain. But it's equally important in some ways. I don't know, maybe not equally important. I always would say, there's nothing more important to me than creating. But I think this relationship is more important in some ways. Yeah, at least right now, I've had many, many years of creating and not being in a relationship. Now I'm experiencing being in a relationship and still creating, but again, confronting the fact that the career is not reaching. The art is not reaching the number of people I want it to reach. And that's very painful right now. And I think in some ways that pain is heightened being here because it makes me feel juvenile. I'm a kid in my parents' house. And I mean, I'd still be here even if I had a fabulously successful career. But yeah, I think it's just coming down to time and age. I think it's all hitting at once, all the obvious things. I guess this is just a midlife crisis. I don't even know if I'd call it a crisis. It's just, yeah. And seeing the kids, like I want kids. It may not happen. It may happen. But realizing that, yeah, the 19 years where I wasn't really in a deep relationship, that is gone. And if I have children with Anna, that would be wonderful. But, I'm in my late 60s when they graduate high school, 70. Like, it's a different experience. And if my career does um, evolve, develop, even relatively quickly, yeah, it's just how much time do I have left? I mean, a good deal of time, but almost certainly past the halfway point, and definitely past the halfway point of good years, and seeing my parents getting older. So, but yeah, also so much to be grateful for. So much to be grateful for. I mean, just the fact that when I'm coming home, so my parents always have this Christmas Eve party because my brother-in-law is not Jewish. He's not particularly Christian, but if you're at all Christian, you celebrate Christmas, especially if you have kids. So they have a party for him, and it's a really fun party. And what was my point there? Oh, someone at the party was like, kind of like, hey, how are you doing being home? Like with the sort of someone who I don't know well, but with almost like a supportive, confidential tone, like, hey, it must be kind of tough, being home. It's tough for a lot of people visiting family. And I was like, no, this is easy. This is an incredibly comfortable place for me. Being loved, being able to connect with people I love. So yeah, how lucky am I? I mean, and how lucky am I that I have this relationship? I really didn't think I would have a relationship like this. And how lucky am I that, it's not over with my career. I still have options. I still have avenues. And in fact, I have a new show that I've been working on for years. It is coming to fruition. I'm hoping it is going to premiere in San Francisco in February. And I've really been digging into it recently, and it's fucking good. It's really good. This is the first truly new show I've done since The Mushroom Cure. So, yeah, a lot to be grateful for. But I think that's part of the equation is, I don't know, there's some relationship between gratitude and mourning. Appreciating what I have maybe doesn't necessarily entail, but it somehow seems to connect with realizing what I've lost. And that all comes down to time. That all comes down to time. Yeah, a part of me wishes, yeah, it was a decade ago or 2 decades ago when a decade ago I'd realized that I was blocking myself from relationships and had the relationship I'm having now and maybe already had kids. That a decade ago I'd realized I was blocking my career and already had the career I wanted. But yeah, it's not over. I'm still alive. So I think this will be the last exposure for 2023. And yeah, I'm going to keep doing this whether or not I want to. My commitment was every week till my next birthday, and I shall adhere to that. Happy New Year.